Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's talk upcoming Kickstarters for next week. As always, a lot of stuff is subject to change. Let's talk about what I do know. Let's talk about the games that I do believe that are launching next week. Games of note that you should be aware of, that you should watch your wallet for. If you missed last week's or this past week's sort of everything that's launched, check out yesterday's video of all 20 that I covered. A little bit of everything, including the big names like Hexplored and Mythic Battles. So check that out. Tomorrow, we're going to have maybe the first of reviews coming from my channel a little bit. And then Monday, as always, I'm going to try and do another Monday Morning Hotness Quarterback, what you need to know, what's new, and what's relevant in the hobby. So that's enough preamble. That's not why you're here. As always, though, thank you for watching. Thank you for even bothering to check me out. And hopefully at some point, maybe this video, maybe earlier, maybe later, thank you so much because I think we're at the 2,000 mark now. Hopefully by the time this airs. So that's about, give or take, teen hundreds more than I ever thought I'd have. So thank you. I really mean it. Okay, that's not why you're here. Let's take a look. First up is this interesting one called Legends of Void. Legends of Void will be launching on April 13. What do you need to know? It is a 1 to 4 player game where you are a hero battling against the void and the seraphs that go along with it, as you can see sort of, I think, on the picture here. They're draining the life out of the land that you occupy. This is a very thematic narrative type of game with card management, hex-style grid-based play, where you are using I'm not sure it's necessarily a currency, but an energy currency exchange sort of type called Lumen, where you are trying to get the most Lumen in order to achieve your objectives. And these Lumen are scrolls that you can use to do various abilities, summon various creatures, help you along your way. And you're going to be fighting in this Outer Lands area, which is modular apparently, and different in each and every game. This is sort of a glimpse from a side of what this is going to look like, and this is the modularity I'm seeing in the background, along with some of the player boards and some of these resources that you can see in the foreground. Here is a little bit better picture and depiction of it. All in all, this looks pretty different, but it also looks very entertaining. So I am not the biggest fan of the hex style of things because I just don't see it that often. And I don't really know how it definitively compares to a grid style base game. But I'm really intrigued by this because honestly, I'd never looked at this page beforehand before doing this video. And I like what I'm seeing so far, which again is a horrible sign for my wallet because there's already way too much stuff in the month of April that is going to cost me money. And I'm not even talking yet even about the biggest one this week that is going to be launching that I already know that I'm going to be going all in on. Here you can see a little bit more about the cards and what you're going to be doing with these cards and the cost of them and then the specific requirements in order to play it and what you actually have to do with the symbology. Now there's a lot of symbology just on these cards, so it looks a little crowded, to be honest, and that sometimes a little bit overdeveloped. Is there too much going on in this game? I don't know. But it looks beautiful. It's something that I think is going to definitely get a second look, and it doesn't look to be heavily miniature based, just with maybe a few miniatures to sort of populate the hex board in the first place. So, I mean, you have to take a look with an overview like this and some standees even maybe instead. So maybe the miniatures are not totally required or totally necessary. The price point might be much more affordable as well. Again, I've heard very little hype about this. I haven't really seen it advertised or talked about anywhere. And this artwork is just, this might be some of the best artwork I've seen all month. You know, even barring some of the other bigger projects. So I'm really impressed by this. I am going to be checking this out. And if this appeals to you at all, to get a little bit better description, I think you should really check it out as well. They talk about it here in terms of the gameplay a little bit. I'll just give you a little summary. There are 4 seasons, and each year that you're measuring in time of the game cycle is broken down into these different phases. The spring draft, where you're getting these scrolls and deciding what to use. The summer, where you're taking these actions of all the things that you can do. Autumn, where you're gathering those resources. And then winter, where the seraphs are moving and you're trying to either defend against them or possibly attack against them. This, I mean, looks like it is right up my alley. I am excited by this, and I can't wait to read more about this. There is a draft rulebook on Board Game Geek already here, and you can take a look at it. but it is 32 pages. And so this is massive. I'm not going to break it down for you here, but there's a lot of overhead, but there looks like a lot of depth to this game too. So I'm scared to see what the price point is, but it looks fantastic. If I wasn't doing enough gameplay video watching from the past week of things that are interesting me, I am going to be reading this game book as well so that I can talk about a little bit more depth and a little bit more nuance next week in terms of how it compares to other type games. It sort of gives me a little bit of the weird Vindication vibe, only not being a Euro, but just sort of that hex-based grid style where you're gathering resources and planning and attacking and doing that sort of thing. It just looks fantastic. I do not want to like this, and I love it. So I really recommend that you probably keep this one on your radar if you have taste at all of like mine, you know, and hope you probably do if you're watching this channel. But anyway, so check it out, Legends of Void on the 13th. Next up, also on the 13th, is Hivernation. This is a 2-player asymmetric strategy game based on real life activities and how bees actually work. Each of you are getting 20 of these double-sided hexes to be able to use. One side are the workers, one side are the drones. And you're also getting 3 of these specialty tiles chosen at random. Now, if this gives you similar vibes to Hive, it's because it does. There's a queen bee sitting in the middle, and you are attaching ones to the outside, and when your 2 sides meet, inevitably, then you can start trying to convert the other side into yours. But unlike Hive, where you are trying to encapsulate the other person's queen, when somebody runs out of tiles, when they have played all of their tiles on the game board, the game ends with whoever has the most flipped up to their side. So it is definitely different, but also a very similar theme. And I hate to say this, again, as a big fan of Hive, I'm going to be checking this out because it does seem to be doing something slightly different as well. So, I mean, again, the question will be, are there going to be like Hive with production? I mean, those tiles are very nice. These look to be cardboard. What is the price point going to be if it's not cardboard? Those are the things that are going to make it or break it for me as someone who is interested in this game. And if you like, I don't think it's necessarily fully abstract, but it's more tile placement with an abstract element, you should probably check this one out too. And I hate to say this right now, I'm 2 for 2 of things I am going to seriously look at. So that will also be launching on the 13th. Next up on the 13th is Bar Fight, the cocktail card game, where you are in a prestigious bartending competition against fellow players. Spirit, Mixer, and Flare cards are going to be your weapons of choice in this game as you're trying to impress the judges each round. Different ingredients have different effects, different judges have different preferences, so you're trying to match up to what you have, but also to what is being judged upon each round specifically. Now, they mentioned that judge cards are going to be announced or shown 3 rounds in advance so that you can plan a little bit ahead. Now, it doesn't say exactly how many rounds you're going to be playing, but I'd think a plethora if you're going to show that many at a time. Here's an example of one of the judge cards that you can see of what they preference down at the bottom. And then sort of what you're going to be seeing in terms of the 3 judges out here each turn and some of your various cards that you're going to be using. That's it. There are no videos, there are no files on Board Game Geek, so if you want to see more, you're going to have to check it out when it launches on the 13th. Next up on the 13th is Cellulose, a plant cell biology game in the lines of several other games with a scientific background where they're trying to stay true to the science, but also combined it with the fun of a game. And this is a spin on a different take of worker placement. You are competing within a plant cell, trying to do the best photosynthesis you can comparatively to other players. So you're going to be using all of the same parts of the cell as your opponents in a worker placement style mechanism. This is the standalone sequel, if you're familiar with it, of Cytosis from 2017 by Genius Games. Now, what they say here is there's going to be more resources, more strategic paths, and more just depth of gameplay. So if you like that, or if you're interested in the scientific side of things with a combination of worker placement, this is maybe speaking your love language. So, again, there's very little information otherwise on Board Game Geek, no videos, no other images, and no files. So, if this appeals to you, go check out the Cytosis page if you want to see what the maybe less complex version looks like, but now in a plant cell on the 13th. Launching on the 14th now, we have Connecting Flights, a 1 to 5 player pick up and deliver route style game, obviously using flights as the mechanism and passengers alongside of it. You are an airline manager trying to compete for resources but also passengers on your airline to be the most profitable. You have airport, plane, and passenger tickets that are all going to have to line up in the correct manner in order to validate all of the flights that are necessary to optimize your scoring. These are going to be purchased, though, in auction. The longer the flight, the more fuel. So it also becomes sort of a puzzle of using those resources selectively first in order to manage correctly. Now, what game wouldn't be complete without a little bit of turbulence? Because this also has random events, or maybe not random, doesn't really say one way or the other, that are going to take its toll on maybe perhaps having to rearrange some of that puzzle-like activity in terms of managing the flights and the resources in order to make you think on your feet. They also mention having a 1 to 2 player version of a cooperative mode that you can use as well to do similar things. There's really only one forum topic on the Board Game Geek page, and it talks about the fact that especially when you're auctioning and competing for these resources and these passengers and these airports and these planes, there could be some cutthroat competition when you're building up your card tableau. So if that interests you with a little bit of, not necessarily direct take that, but a little bit tangential in terms of an auction style of things, you should maybe check this out when it launches on the 14th. Now, going back in time, because I skipped over this one somehow on my list, is Transmissions. A 1 to 4 player, mechanical friendly worker placement style game. Variable powers, action drafting. Did I mention Rondel? Ooh, now maybe I've got you intrigued. What you're doing is you're sharing workers as robots and moving them around the rondel, collecting engrams as well as electricity. Those are then used to gather ideas in how to upgrade your robots to make them better and more efficient. You also, as evidenced by the picture, there are pipes that you're going to be managing and routes in order to maximize other things like butterflies, because what doesn't go with robots better than butterflies, right? But you're going to be using these pipes to connect routes of birds and butterflies as sort of an additional way of scoring points in this game. The game ends when somebody's robot is complete, there's no more ideas, or all the pipes are built. Now, unlike some of the other games, you can see a little bit of the artwork here with a little bit of the placement style that you're going to be seeing. And the artwork is definitely very interesting. And you can see even here on this picture that they talk about a little bit of the setup in terms of the player variability and where things are going to be along the lines, including these ideas that I mentioned as well. Here's a little bit more of the artwork. And it's just kind of cool to look at. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot more info on how the game is actually going to play in terms of rounds and turns. There are no files, there are no videos yet on Board Game Geek, but it does talk about the fact that there is going to be a solo option. So for you solo gamers, this might be intriguing to look at as a worker placement with a rondel style that is definitely looking, at least on the surface, very different than many of the others out there. So check it out when it launches. Now, also on the 13th is the expansion for the very under the radar, but very well thought of now, game that came out in the past year of Canvas. And this is the expansion for it, Canvas Reflections. Coincidentally, they reached out to me and they sent me a copy of Canvas, and I will be making that my first review on this channel with the new review channel name. You'll see it revealed tomorrow. And so I will be talking about just Canvas, how I think about Canvas, what I feel about it, but also a little bit of what you need to know about Reflections. Now, if you're not familiar with Canvas, the base game, they take the Mystic Veil sort of transparent cards and overlays in terms of building, and they make it instead into a canvas or a painting style picture where you are laying these pictures on top of each other and using the tabs at the bottom to get various bonuses and score points depending on what they are, how many of them there are, and what other conditions you're meeting. And it's using sort of a mechanism that is sort of like from Century Road or Century Golem, where if you want one of the splayed out cards or pictures in front of you, you have to lay a certain number of pieces along the line to get the one that you want. But if you pick one of the ones that's earlier, you get whatever of those bonus pieces or points are on there for your use or for your scoring later on. And this is going to be an expansion to that, which a game which sort of flew under the radar that was sort of unexpectedly actually good and not just a very pretty game to look at. The whole point and the whole reason for the name Reflections is they're adding things called mirror cards in order to increase the strategy as well as the depth of the gameplay. They are also adding a new kind of ribbon, the gold ribbon, as opposed to the regular ribbons that you have. As with the base game, I'm assuming that there will be a deluxe component to this, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. It's sort of been sort of a under the radar hit from 2020, early 2021. So we'll see what else there is to offer when it launches with the expansion on the 13th. Next up, on the 14th, the biggest one of the week, probably the biggest raiser, maybe second only to Mythic Battles Ragnarok, depending on what it does, is the expansion, the standalone expansion to Marvel United X-Men. Now, they don't even have an entry into Board Game Geeks, and so that's why I'm using this. And this is the, 1 to 4 player cooperative Marvel-based IP miniatures with chibis based on the MCU, but now expanding onto the X-Men side of things, which makes me all the more excited because I am an X-Men fan, more so even than the regular MCU on the Avengers side, which is mainly what the first one is. And there were something like 6 expansions or 7 expansions that came with the first all-in set. Now, they have said that at least some of those expansions, even though they were marked limited run or Kickstarter exclusive, will be available during the second run. And I think part of that is due to the fact that they partnered with Spin Master and they are doing a retail release of the core, which led a lot of people to be a little unhappy the first time around because it was split into 2 waves to begin with. And if you still only got wave 1 and paid extra shipping, you got it about the time the retail released. Now, personally, I don't care about when I get it as long as I'm getting more stuff and the exclusivity is there for a better price point. But it's going to be really interesting to see, 1, what is now being given in the second Kickstarter, but then 2, how much of the depth of the X-Men universe are we going to see? Is it going to be akin to the depth that we saw in the first Kickstarter? Because there are some villains and some good guys that really aren't mainstream and that are, really put to good use in this game. And will we see as great of depth with the X-Men? And I sure hope so. And I hope we see things like the Dark Phoenix. And I sure hope we see things like the Age of Apocalypse. That would be the ideal thing for me. If you're not familiar with the game, though, itself, is you have 6 locations set up in a circle, and you have a bad guy, and you're choosing your heroes, and you each have a very limited pre-constructed deck of about, I think, 12 cards that you are playing in sequence where bad guy, good guy, good guy, good guy, bad guy. But you're going around and you have the ability to use the cards and the symbols of the person who played before you in order to mitigate and choose your actions. And you have to achieve a certain number of objectives, usually 2, to unlock the final way to actually attack the main villain. The villains all have various ways of exploiting and causing endgame conditions, as well as ways to attack or deal with the heroes in the first place. And although the core game itself is relatively simplistic and straightforward, just with the Kickstarter exclusive box, the depth of gameplay and the variability is there. I will say, though, that I do not think that enough of the heroes, having not played more than about 16 or 18 or so far, I'm not sure the variability is as high as I would like, but that also goes with the fact that there are only 3 symbols used on these cards. And so they have said that, I think in the videos that they've shown so far, that there will be a 4th action or a 4th power, and there's going to be a way to sort of retcon it back into this first set because of the X-Men having mutant powers and it being an additional element. The other new thing that you need to know about this is that there is going to be a 1v-all feature so that you can have one person be the bad guys instead of the AI or the fighting the game, and you can split it that way. They're also maybe going to have the option to have some of these villains as playable characters, sort of like they have done with other series. And it'll be interesting to see if there's also like a crossover from the second one, an expansion from the second one that's tailored to some of these villains in the first one. I would be shocked if CMON didn't do that, as they've done with other games like with Arcadia Quest in that sense, where they've increased the cross portability. All in all, I hope they have more locations as well, because they need some more variability. And I will be getting the cardboard layers of those perhaps if I decide not to laminate them, because that is probably the biggest quality control issue that I saw, they're just a little flimsy. So all in all, I'll tell you right now, I'm already all in, unless they completely depart from the boat that I like already. And it's just going to be what all is there and how much is the price point when it launches on April 14. Now, I have another game called Alter Ego, not Alter Ego, but Alter Ego, that I have marked as launching on the 14th, but I can't really find any other information on it, so you'll have to take my word for it. And so I'm sure someone else out there has more information, but again, just something else that's flying under the radar. But there is no Board Game Geek description either, so I can't really tell you much more. Great, right? I know, very helpful. But obviously, there's always like 6 or 8 games that don't have a whole lot of hype anyway. Consider this one of them, but I'm using this obviously as a placeholder. Next up is the 2 to 4 player game, also launching the 14th, Journey to Ecrya. It is a role-player driven fantasy-esque game for 2 to 4 players. You are one of 8 various characters trying to make your way to Cursed Mountain. Along the way, you're going to encounter a variety of society's notable notables, and as well as various vicious creatures that you may have to defend yourself against. Equip, survive, spellcast, journey, first one there, and then defeats the boss, wins the game. Now, they have a whole bigger description here on the Board Game Geek page, and you're playing anywhere from 2 to 4 players, and it's a turn-based game where each player takes the role of the game master as well as an active player, depending on whose turn it is. You're going to be drawing cards, equipping cards, using them to prepare for each day of the adventure. So after you enter the travel phase, you're going to have a random encounter, and that's drawn by the person who is the current game master at that point. So that's where you're going to be having special events, exploring locations, or just fighting whatever creature you come across. If you resolve some of these encounter cards that you run into, that's how you advance on the board. Your goal is obviously to reach said mountain, like I mentioned, but when you get there, you have to defeat the final boss, which is belonging to one of 3 various enemy factions, so it's not going to be the same thing every time. As I mentioned, 8 hero cards, 3 different bosses, 75 treasure cards, 75 encounter cards, and 15 event cards. So they're giving some variety there. They have their whole website of this is what it looks like, and how are you actually playing? And there is a rule book on the website as well. Now, it's a 25-page rule book, so I'm not going to give you a full breakdown, but you should know that, I mean, clearly, as opposed to some of these other Kickstarters I've mentioned this week, there's a lot more that we know and that you can know about with this game already beforehand prior to the launch, including things like, okay, how is the tile system going to work? What does the modularity look like? Here are all the types of cards. Here's the gameplay. Here's the setup. Here's how to read the cards. There's a lot of stuff going on. So here's the attack, the resistance, the life points, what they're doing, what type of energy they have, all of that stuff. Here are the enemy factions, a little bit of everything. So you can take a deep look at that on the website, which is, again, straight linked from the Board Game Geek page. And again, the biggest question of this is, like I've said before, how RPG-ish is it? Because when I want a board game and a crawler, I don't want straight up D&D-esque stuff. I want something that is different, some variation, some nuance. And what the nuance and the variation is in this game is going to be probably the make it or break it for me. And so here you can see a little bit of the Tabletopia type of version of what it's going to look like, and the tableaus and the cards that you're going to be using on each round and each turn in your separate factions. So it'll be interesting to see how this differentiates itself from the others that are in this crowded genre. But that is Journey to Ecrya, launching on the 14th. Last up, launching on April 12th, is Scrap Racer. I know, we're clearly going in chronological order tonight. This is from Queen Games. It's a press your luck, dice rolling race game. First one to do 3 laps is the winner. What you're doing on a turn is you have 6 dice that you're going to be rolling, and you have to roll them one at a time. Because the caveat being that if you roll doubles of anything, you have to draw a crash card. And crash cards can be highly unpredictable. And that's where the push your luck element comes in. Based on the die, it depends on how far you're going to move. Depending on the double, you may get boosted. You may also get slowed down. Boost markers, unique abilities between the drivers. And if you end up occupying the same space, they talk about a duel that happens between the drivers to determine who is actually in the lead. So here you can see some of the examples of what these cards may entail with the symbology. Then you have also the boosts or the rerolls. I'm assuming these are going to be some sort of power attached to your character themselves. And then you can see a little bit of the asymmetric drivers and their vehicles in the first place. This is a setup example of what your character's ship may look like, as well as the track that's going around. It sort of reminds me of the riding dinosaur one from a year or two ago, as well as a little bit of steampunk fusion. A little bit of those two sort of combined. Now, how nuanced is it going to be? How different is it going to be? Because those are definitely two dynamically different games with the same sort of features done in a completely different way. Is this going to be similar to one of them? Is it going to be different? Also, this is Queen. Queen has improved their customer service side of things with the last several projects, I think, because, 5 years ago or so, there were some serious issues with some of the previous projects. But with Queen, they've also gone, ever since the Amsterdam Hamburg, that they are not going to be selling the traditional distributor, online marketer, online shopper anymore, and that it's only going to be through their web shop, if I'm remembering correctly. So the time of trying to get these games through one of those without some of the deluxeifications that they have been throwing in on almost every one has definitely lessened. Also, with Queen, they offer their Queenies, which is basically their exclusives, and many of those Queenies are very hard to get outside of the Kickstarter, so you have to be a little bit prudent. Now, I think the last one that I can recall that was sort of a pass for me, but I was thinking about, was Winter Kingdom, the sequel, standalone expansion / just separate game to Kingdom Builder. The exclusives there were just more in terms of the deluxeification of wooden buildings and that sort, rather than gameplay, I believe. Now, is it going to be more like that, or is it going to have some more of the gameplay that we saw with things like Luxor and Copenhagen and several of the others? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see. Queens are always sort of a look and check out, but I just don't think they're always for me. They are a solid, 7. They'd put out solid 7 games for me. They're not spectacular, but they're pretty good and they're pretty fun for the most part. If it really is attractive for you. Runestone, Copenhagen, Luxor, all games in my collection. So I'm happy to say I have a few hits from them. But, they're also not like games I really want to play every single night either. So is this going to follow that trend? Is it going to break it? I don't know. As with all the others, I'm going to take a look. That's Scrape Racer from Queen Games, launching on April 12th. Okay, that's it. That's all I got for you so far. That's all that I know that's coming out next week, and I'm sure there will be probably almost 1.5 times that actually launch. So you're just going to have to tune in if you want to see what's all out there. So, well, thanks, guys. Thanks for checking it out this weekend. Like I said, next 2 days going to have videos, and then, hopefully a couple days off. It's been jam-packed on this side of things. So hopefully I have a little bit of a break and a little bit of free time too myself. So, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for just showing me your support with your clicks. Have a great weekend. Stay classy. See you around.